2011 marks the 150th anniversary of the start of the Civil War. In some ways, the war belongs to the long, distant past. But there are times, particularly in Virginia, where much of the war was fought, when it can seem tangibly close. There may be as many as 60 people alive whose fathers fought for the South in the war. A handful of them live in Virginia. All of these individuals were born to elderly men many decades after the war ended. All of them today are senior citizens. And one of those men is Walton Follin, now aged 92, of Fairfax County, Virginia. On a recent afternoon, Walton sat down with his friend, Ray Birch, and recalled memories of his father. Walton's father was John Nelson Follin. The elder Follin enlisted in the Confederate Army at the age of 15. He was a cavalry soldier who rode with General John S. Mosby. John Nelson Follin was born in 1847 on a Fairfax County farm near Colvin Run, a few miles from present-day Tyson's Corner. Just a few months before his 16th birthday, he enlisted in the Confederate Army by lying about his age. All the other young men he knew at the time were enlisting. As he reported to his unit, he rode in an old workhorse, which was immediately taken from him and hitched to a wagon. Follin joined Thomas Rosser's brigade and was able to obtain a younger and faster horse for a cavalry mount.
He rode a horse down the hill to Colvin Run Mill. Rode a horse down there.
I think it was just an old workhorse.
It was. It was.
They probably hooked it up to a wagon.
Immediately hooked up to the wagon. You bring back memories. You bring back memories.
Walton remembers his father saying he fought in the Battle of the Wilderness. He described it as a terrible battle, with much of it fought at night. He said it sounded like a hurricane coming through, knocking down trees. The noise was unbearable, and bodies were everywhere. Later, John Nelson Follin was wounded in Petersburg, Virginia. Shot in the hip, he was sent to a Confederate hospital. During his recovery, the hospital was captured by Union forces. Union doctors sent him to a hospital near Fort Monroe.
He was shot in the hip, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Did that ever bother him in later years?
Yes.
Did they get the bullet out, or did he still have the bullet in there, do you know?
He left it in.
Left it in.
Mm-hmm. He was tough.
From Fort Monroe, which is near Hampton, John was able to obtain a Union uniform. He walked away from the hospital, traveling mostly at night and avoiding the main roads. Stopping at isolated houses, he bought a few biscuits and ate them with wild berries. He eventually made it back to Fairfax County. Finding his sisters and slaves running the farm, they helped him recover. Once, they saw 4 Yankees coming up the lane on horseback. His sisters hid John's clothing in the fireplace chimney, while he hid under the back porch. The soldiers tied their mounts to the porch columns and searched the house. John was only inches away from the horse's hooves.
Did the Yankees come looking for him, or?
He sure did.
And
sure did.
What did he do then?
Hid under the porch.
Hid under the porch.
And he could see the horse's hooves. He could see them up in the porch. He could reach out and grab a horse with a hoof. With that close.
Once recovered, John Nelson Follin rejoined the war as a member of Mosby's Rangers. He rode on several raids. Near Manassas, he had his horse shot out from under him. He fell off and played possum while the Yankees investigated. They kicked him in the ribs and rolled him over, but concluded that he was dying or dead. They left him there. Follin again managed to return to Mosby's Rangers. Returning to civilian life after the war ended, John Nelson Follin inherited the family farm and continued to live at Magnolia Glen, still carrying that bullet in his hip. He married Marietta French in 1866, and together they had 9 children, 7 girls and 2 boys. Mary died in 1911. Follin then married Lillian Lowe. With Lillian, he fathered 2 sons, and the youngest was Walton, born in 1918. By then, John Nelson Follin was 71 years old. During the 1920s and 30s, a few of the old Civil War veterans would come to Magnolia Glen for a reunion. The old veterans tried to top each other with their wild tales. Walton recalls one 4th of July picnic on their front porch. One of the old attendees had a cane, and he cracked young Walton on the shin a few times. Walton didn't like this, and he plotted his revenge. He knew sooner or later that the old man would have to visit the outhouse, so he took firecrackers and pieced together a long fuse. When the veteran went to the outhouse, Walton snuck around back and lit the fuse, returning safely to the porch with time to spare. When the firecracker exploded, the old veteran came out holding his pants and cussing up a storm.
And that caused a lot of commotion. To all of a sudden on the porch and run to the end of the porch to see what happened. He said, "Paul, your son put a firecracker on me while I was in the outhouse." He said, "Walter, you should have never done that." He said, "It's too late now. The devil's been caused."
Walton got his revenge and only a mild scolding after the veterans had left.
I could sit on that porch there and bring back memories like you have there about my father. You bring back golden memories.
But,
They're still up there,
Yeah,
Walton. They're still there.
I go up every now and then. I go up every now and then.
John Nelson Follin was elected Justice of the Peace for Fairfax County in 1895. He held trials, determined fines, settled minor claims and disputes. He remained a justice until his death in 1937, and he's buried at Andrew Chapel Cemetery.
I had a plaque put up there. John Nelson Follin fought in the Civil War. That's about a foot wide. I put it on tombstone.
The Follin family has a long and distinguished history that goes back even further than the Civil War. Walton's great-grandfather fought in the American Revolution. He was in the U.S. Navy during the War for Independence and was captured on the high seas by a British ship. He was carried to England and confined there in prison. He escaped by breaking a hole in the wall, and eventually made his way back to America, where he lived for many years. His grave is in Arlington Cemetery, just a short distance from the mansion. It's a remarkable story told in only 4 generations. For the Follin family, only 4 generations divide the American Revolution to the present. Over their long lives, just think of the history these fallen men have witnessed.